All right, thank you everyone for joining us for tonight's lecture. As a friendly reminder, this lecture will be recorded. If you do not wish to appear on the recording, please turn your camera off. To reduce feedback, everyone was muted upon entrance. If you have questions during the presentation, please utilize the chat feature and I'll read them out when appropriate, but please know there will be time for Q&A at the end of the lecture. And with that, I'll pass it along to Margot.
Hey y'all, my name's Margot Lester. Thanks for being with me tonight. It's great to be with you virtually. I'm dialing in from Carborough over in Orange County. If you want to put in the chat where you're from, that'd be great. If there's any questions along the way, we will be having that Q&A at the end. But if you've got something that you just don't want to wait for, that's okay. I really want to make sure that we're getting your needs met tonight. So if you have questions, you can type them in the chat. If it's during the presentation part of my workshop, I can't see the screen, but Katrina will be grabbing questions and popping those out to me during those sessions. I am a certified environmental educator by the state of North Carolina and a nationally certified interpretive guide. And in doing that kind of work, I got in to a lot more talking about climate. Obviously, you sort of can't talk about the environment and nature without talking about climate change. And that really got me interested in what do we know about what makes an effective climate story, and also what we might think makes an effective story that actually doesn't. And that's part of what we're going to talk about tonight. If you need to take a break, obviously, most of you have your screens off, so that's great. But do feel free to take a break if you want to. If you need to unmute for any reason, you can. I really do believe that anyone can be a climate communicator. And in fact, we all need to be, right? There's a lot to talk about. There are lots of different aspects of climate change and climate communications. And we can be really effective in advocating for the changes that we want to see and for the protection and conservation of the things that we really care about. There's a ton of academic research that validates that our stories, just as people in the community, regardless of any credentials you might have, make us really trusted and reliable sources. So you, regardless of what your day job is or what your favorite hobby is, you're going to be a terrific source of information for people and somebody that they are more likely to trust. It's interesting why that's true. A lot of folks have trouble with climate information for a number of reasons. One, it's just too future-y, or the impacts are too scary, or they're not exactly sure if it's happening where they are. And that can really undermine their ability to want to engage and take action or even just be involved in a dialogue. But there's other information or research out there that shows that people who are sort of denying climate or skeptical about climate change at all don't always trust scientists, which troubles me as a person who has a lot of sciencey friends. But that they do actually trust people they know to give them information about science. If you are really interested in all the research I'm going to talk about tonight, I can send you some articles that outline it. But I'm trying to keep this really accessible and kind of light tonight. But there was a study by a public relations company called Edelman that said that a lot of Americans don't feel like scientists even know how to talk to people like me, so people like them, and that they trust scientists some, but they like to have some real information from people they know to support that too. And so with the public scrutiny that's coming at scientists, it's really important that we be sort of their spokespeople, that we advocate for what they care about. So I'm going to start sharing my screen at this point. Again, if you have questions, you could put them in the chat. If no one notices that, if Katrina has to run out for something and I won't see it, you can just unmute and ask me. Give me a second to get this rolling. I don't need to make quick and better. That's not what really any of us is here for. Okay, terrific. So just quick credentials about me. Like I said, I've got some state and national certifications. I'm also part of a really cool program that NASA's running for as long as we still have NASA, called the Earth to Sky program. And it's where they reach out to connect NASA scientists with interpreters at state and national parks, in schools and things like that. It's a terrific program. If you're interested in that and you are an educator or a volunteer at a conservation or an environmental organization, feel free to drop me a note. I'll have all my contact information at the end of the session, and I can tell you more about that program. It's still running for now, and hopefully for longer. So what the data tells us is that climate communication is most effective when it's personal. And that's on two levels. One, personal, like it's my story, but also that it's personal and located to the person you're talking to. So it's not an abstract or a global phenomenon. It's something that is happening to a person these people know, or at least is in their community, and to a place that they care about. And the Yale Center for Climate Change Communication is one of two academic centers in the United States that have been doing this for a long time. There are other centers, but George Mason and Yale have been doing climate change communication research for a long time. Personal stories, especially when told by the individuals themselves, help us recognize the immediacy of the climate crisis and its impacts and increase our empathetic response to such events. And what's important here is that empathetic response. When we can empathize with what's happening to our friends and neighbors or to the environment around us, we are more likely to take action. But it's hard to empathize sometimes when you're talking about data or something abstract. So what the data tells us from, again, a bunch of these different research studies, is that there are a few traits that we found to be effective. And this is from both academic research and commercial marketing research. And the 6 traits isn't just something I made up. It comes from the Northwest Writing Lab, which was a program, or still is a program, of the Department of Education that studied thousands of different kinds of literature and communications that were deemed effective. So it could be, yes, the canon of high school literature, but it's also Pulitzer Prize winning articles and things like that. So things that have been noted as effective and good. And they came up with some traits. They're mostly about voice, organization, ideas, and details. And you'll see that here. I've looked at these traits that came out of a Yale program and a potential energy program, and aligned those that way. So effective climate stories are simple and easy to convey for us, so we can tell them easily, easy to understand for the people who are listening to us. They reflect personal experience that's backed up by science. That's really important to add to our credibility as speakers, and to, if we want to show that there's impact beyond just our little neighborhood or our community. They center local places and things that people care about. Again, you can see how that would be really important to that, getting folks to empathize. They focus on the present and the recent past. And this is something that if you've been reading a lot of climate communications or consuming a lot of it, you may notice this shift, that we're talking about what's happening now and how we know it's different from a few years ago, but not necessarily all the way back in time. And we're not saying it's going to be a problem down the road. These are problems that are happening now. And when we can make it a now issue, it makes it easier for people to grab onto. It feels a little more concrete. We create urgency with ideas like later is too late or do it for the next generation. These have actually been tested with focus groups of people of all different beliefs around climate change and the environment. And these seem to be effective. I am not by any means saying you have to use those terms, but a concept like those can really be helpful, especially if you're talking to somebody who has kids or grandkids or nieces and nephews, or a very strong sense of social responsibility to do it for the next generation can be super effective. This last one surprises some people. What they found in the studies is that when we can couch our messaging in a way that conveys hope and progress, people again are more likely to engage. It doesn't feel like their work won't matter or a small thing. What we want to remind people is that every action matters, and we can all, if we're all doing it, then we get the power of collective action. So I want to talk quickly about hopefulness. It's really important, and it is hard to feel. Like I just want to put the giant caveat right now, especially it is hard to feel hope, but it's really crucial for a lot of reasons in the context of tonight's conversation. It's because hope is contagious. And this is from Parker Mullen Bushman, who's the president of the National Association of Interpreters. These are not language interpreters. These are people who interpret nature and history and other kinds of events like that. Hope is contagious. When we have hope, we can inspire others to have hope as well and see the potential for positive change in their own lives. So when I'm talking about how we can tell our own climate stories, one of the most important things that we can do is be for something. Even as we might be we're against greenhouse gas emissions, but we're going to be for things you can do to stop or to limit those. So the more that we can feel like things work, things are working, we know how to solve these problems, because in a lot of cases we do, but it's easier to, misery loves company is that old adage, and it's a cliche for a reason because it feels true a lot of the time. So when we give somebody something to be for, rather than helping them decide there's nothing they can do, we are really scaffolding people, particularly who are scared about what's going on, or people who are skeptical about it. So that's another reason to be a little bit hopeful in our communications. So before I go into the strategy, I just want to see if there are any questions about what we've talked about so far and make sure that everything kind of makes sense, that it's clear where we're going.
So I can't remember where I read it. But I remember I read something about how so often we're focused on the negative aspects of climate change. And then when we're teaching to children, they wind up feeling really hopeless that there's not much that they can do. And that starts even at a really young level in a lot of environmental education curricula that's out there. So it's really great to hear you saying that and remembering to spin it back to like what we can do that is positive and making sure we communicate that to our children.
Yeah, that's a great point. And there are several organizations, like Project Drawdown is one, but there are a bunch of others that are actually starting to give us the information on what's working in terms that can be adjusted to wherever somebody's interest and understanding level is. But especially for kids who are bummed out about a lot of things, it is super important for us to say, yeah, some things are happening that are scary or hard, but we know we have some solutions, and let's focus on solving those. And here are some things that have worked so far. So when we want to share our climate stories, sometimes it's hard. We don't know where to start, or we've got a lot of feelings about it. For many of us, and I'm betting it's true for a lot of y'all tonight, we care about this a lot. I don't think you'd give up an hour of your Monday night to sit here, especially when it's relatively nice outside. It's still pretty sunny in Carborough, to talk about this if you didn't care about it a lot. And part of what the strategy I'm going to show you tonight does is it builds in, it supports all of those 6 traits that I showed you, but it also helps you back a little bit away from the strong feelings you may have about it. There's a link in the chat to a strategy and an example that we're going to go through tonight. And I will also show you a QR code that you can scan, and we'll send it out in the follow-up to download a blank organizer if you want one. This is called the Position Rationale Proof Strategy. One of the reasons I love it is it was developed for 3rd graders. So I'm relatively confident that most of us can can manage it even after a long day at the office or with our kids or managing other things in our lives. Um, what I like about it is it captures a lot of the stuff, the information that we need beyond the facts that we have to share so that we can be clearer in our own thinking. It's called a pre-writing strategy, but it's really more of a thinking strategy. And I'm gonna walk us through it super fast. Again, you can follow along with the document that's in the chat, and we'll send it out later as well. Um, Here's the QR code. If you want to scan this too, for the blank version, you can also just sketch this out at home to make it look like the other one, or just write the prompts. It's very loosey-goosey. I will say that I like writing it on the organizer itself because constraints fuel creativity a lot of the time. And if I feel like I just have this much space to fill with a most important thing I want people to know or 3 facts, I tend to think a lot more clearly and concisely about it. It's a fun little trick. Again, if you haven't had time to grab this QR, I'll show it again at the end.
While people are grabbing that, Daisha, which I apologize if I mispronounced that, we were talking about the drawdown challenge, and she said, should you decide to work with a drawdown eco challenge or any other eco challenge, there's a quantification of data which helps to show the kids that their actions do have impacts. It really helped her kids visualize their actions.
Awesome. I'm so glad you're using it. It's one of my favorite programs, and I love their whole approach. That's great to hear. Thank you for that data point. So for the one of the most important parts of our personal story is that we show up in it, and that we show up as the kind of person that the people we're talking to wants to hear from. So that's why the top of the organizer is all about your audience and you. Who do you want to talk to? What are their objections and questions? My favorite story about this is when I was back in junior high, there was a guy, real name, T-Bird Julian. T-Bird was very cool. There's no chance T-Bird Julian was ever going to be at a party that Margot Lester was going to, but my mother didn't think that was true. And I learned to say, like, Mom, Peggy's having a party on Saturday night, and T-Bird Julian is not going to be there. And that was enough for my mother to be like, okay, you can go. It just got us over an objection I knew she was going to have. So we may not necessarily be as clear on those as I was with my mom, but you can guess usually. You can have a pretty good hunch on what the objections are or what the questions might be. A question everybody has is, why should I care? And how do you know? Those are the 2 most important. But you may be able to tap into some of their concerns and fears. And then you can tune your voice to be one that they want to hear from, that resonates with them, that sounds like somebody they trust. This isn't about presenting yourself as somebody you're not, but we all know from all the communications we do every day that we sound a little different sometimes depending on who we're talking to. We may be really excited about something. We may be calmer about something. And that happens in our writing. Even if you're going to be telling your climate story, I suggest you write it first, just for note taking, right? So this is where we would capture those. You'll see here an example that I've got. This is from a thing I just wrote this morning for this, so it's real. I'm going to write about how I know climate change is real. So my audience, people who may not believe in climate change or are unsure who to trust about it, they should know, why should I believe in it? And why should they believe me? I need to make sure I tell them that. And who do I trust as a person? I want to sound like a person they know and trust, or at least think they should trust or want to trust, who believes climate change is happening. So you can see these are just notes. This is not the best writing you're ever going to do. You can just jot down some thoughts here. Then we can talk about our purpose. So now that we know who we're talking to and we have a little more insight on who they want to hear from and what their concerns might be, what do we want to do? Why are you sharing your opinion? What do you want them to think, feel, or do? What do you want to see happen after you tell them the story? And this is designed to be self-serving. It can also be great, like, I want to save the environment, or I want to reduce climate change. But it's also like, I think we all want to be believed and trusted. I think that's a basic human desire. And if that's true for you, write it down. There's not, like, it can absolutely go there. for me, I want to show the impact of climate change where I live, and create a connection between my story and what the person I'm talking to may see near them. That's a tactic I use a lot. And then spur them to believe me and or take action. Those are the important things for me. And what I like about establishing the think, feel, or do is that it gets our brain, it's background processing while we're doing the rest of the organizer. So we're also kind of scaffolding ourselves and pulling our argument together, our case together. Um, so the next thing we want to do is talk about, what do you think? What's your position? Why do you think it? And how do you know? It's really a pretty simple framework. And it looks like this. If you're playing along at home and you're writing these down, that's great. Keep going. We will have a little time, if we have it, to maybe do a little work time. But if you're filling it out as we go, I'd love for you to share if you feel comfortable doing that at the end. So I know climate change is real because I see it happening in my front yard. If the setup were different, I would show you my front yard. I should have put a picture in here. I'll do that next time. Sorry. And then I just say, why do I think it? Because I've lived here for a long time and the creek's flooding more often than it used to. I got data to show it, both my own data and data from the climate office and the number of flood alerts I get from the Weather Channel. And I know that we need to act now to keep things from getting worse. And the reason I know that is because we've got data on reducing greenhouse gases. And we know that it's important for us to do that. It's really important for companies to do that. That we've made progress under the prior administration, and even my community is doing stuff like planting more trees, trying to protect the trees that we have to keep temperatures down. And then I like to try to invite folks with a question on that think, feel, or do thing. Like, what do you notice? Let's help each other solve these problems. So I think it's really important on the proof side. This is where we want to go back to those questions and objections that we have higher up, and make sure that we're addressing those, or maybe we decide we don't want to address them, and that's okay too. I just want it to be a decision instead of I forgot to. So that's one of the reasons that we try to write it down up above, and then we want to try to address it here. But if you make a decision that because it's not the right venue or something is going on in the world that changes that, that's okay. Just know why you're not sharing some information. I want to talk quickly about information. You saw I had a bunch of different types of information there. So there are examples and explanations. It's called exposition, if you remember your high school English class. And they are details that explain or describe something. There's also evidence. This is details that quantify, that really do feel like proof. A lot of scientific data falls in this category. What I think is interesting here is that you'll notice there's two kinds of details that are not data and science. They are not even necessarily objective. And there's only one that's really facty. And I think what's hard for us as people, again, who care about telling climate stories is we love data. Most of us anyway, like I love data. I'm always looking for data. But that's because I already believe this is true and I have my own examples of why it's true. So the evidence is validating me. I don't necessarily think you need to have two expository details for one evidentiary detail, but I'd like you to try to have a little bit of each. And remember, as we are talking about our lived experiences and what's happening in our neighborhoods, those examples and explanations are really pretty easy to come up with. And you'll see back on mine, I've got, I keep having to move the bird bath and the fire pit farther away from the creek. That's not really a scientific piece of data. That is just an example from my lived experience. The water level we had 3 years ago when a giant tropical storm blew through is now not the high water mark, which is a little surprising. Now it comes, even though we haven't had any more of those, the high water mark just comes when it rains. And a little bit of sciencey data from my rain gauge. But then I have the data, those 2 points, and then I go back to explanations. So you see that there's a blend of stuff here. Again, not an ironclad rule that you need to have 2 to 1 or anything like that, but a blend is going to help you reach more people. And here's why. So examples are those anecdotes and stories that mean most to people who lack information or trust. They're also the easiest to understand. And remember that first trait was simple to convey and to understand. People can relate to an example. Explanations are also really good. Definitions that resonate with people who are curious. If you've got young people in your life, they're always like, well, why is that? How does that work? So that's really important. People who don't have a lot of information often need explanations to scaffold them and support them and give them more context for the examples that you might have shared with them. And finally, we have the evidence. Again, these facts or data that validate the decisions they're ready to make or they've already made. So again, if you're talking to people who believe in human-caused climate change, and then the evidence is going to resonate with them, or people who are pretty sure. There's skeptics, and then there are people who are sure, but they might not have taken action yet. That's our sweet spot in a lot of this. And those folks are ready to make a decision, but they might need a little more explanation and evidence to move them to take action. So again, I just want to open it up super quick. Are there any questions or observations about what we've done so far? Okay. Has anybody been writing along at home? You can raise your hand or do another. Do you guys want some time? If you could put in the chat again, sorry, I can't see it right now, but if somebody wants to put in the chat, would you guys like time to try to sketch out your own climate story right now? Thinking about it as sort of, a few sentences.
No. No. No.
Okay.
Some people are typing.
Okay, excellent. While you're typing, I'm going to just talk over you if you're writing your sketching your thing out. One of the ways to do it is to complete, you obviously want to complete that top chunk, just to get yourself grounded in this and make sure you're addressing everybody's needs, both yours and the person you're talking to or communicating with. Then I like to write the position, focus on that one thing you're trying to communicate, and then work across. So you've got the why you think it, that's your rationale, proof points for that, and then keep going across. Now, that is how Margot Lester likes to do it. There is no rule here. If you'd rather get all of your rationale in a row and then work across, maybe you only have one rationale. That is fine. We are not writing a research paper for tonight. You can absolutely use this to write a research paper. But for tonight, we just want to have a quick story we can tell people. And the easy way to do that for me is just to treat this as quick notes. Phrases, bullets, placeholders. If you don't have information, get the temperature data or use a quote here. It's going to be really helpful. This is the one I wrote legitimately off that organizer you just saw in the earlier pages. I know climate change is real because I see it happening in my front yard. I've lived here for 20 years and the creek in my front yard floods more and more often now. For instance, the water level after a hurricane 3 years ago was 30 feet from our house. Even though we haven't had a tropical storm since, the high water mark is now 17 feet. I keep having to move the bird bath and the fire pit farther away from the creek. My rain gauge data shows 18 more days of more than an inch of rain in 2024 and 3 so far in 2025. And data from trusted sources backs me up. I'm getting more flash flood, severe storm, and drought alerts from the county and the Weather Channel on my phone. And research from the North Carolina Climate Office shows we're getting more whiplash weather, which is periods of severe drought and rain that alternate. It's scary, but there are things we can do to keep it from getting worse right now. If businesses, agencies, and people like us drove and idled less, this is proof that I did this earlier, we can make even more progress on greenhouse gas emissions, which are the major factor in this crazy weather. We made progress on lowering national emissions during the Biden administration, and towns like Chapel Hill, like Carver and Chapel Hill, are instituting low idling policies and planting trees to improve things locally. When more of us take small actions like these, they add up to tangible impact. What kind of weather changes have you noticed where you live? What actions can you take? Let's help each other. So you can see that I had all kinds of note taking. And then as I'm drafting, I was just literally working across. So rationale, proof points, rationale, proof points, rationale, proof points. And then I try to end with that think, feel, or do. How can I connect with people? Maybe we connect over the weather. You know, everybody loves to talk about the weather. Or actions that people are taking or might want to know that they can take. And then I like to always end with an offer to help each other. That could be get access to resources. That could be maybe we do a project together. Maybe we buddy up and go to a town meeting together. That's always fun. Highly recommend. Also, particularly if you are going to show up at a town meeting where usually you get 3 minutes to talk, this is a terrific strategy for that. I was at the Youth Climate Summit at the Museum of Life and Science last year, and I taught this as a civic engagement strategy to help young people who wanted to go to town meetings pull something together that's short and concise and has the mix of information that people wanted. So it's a super effective tool for that too. Okay, we are done with sort of the formal part of the presentation. I am happy to open it up for questions, or did anybody write their story and would like to share it with us? Okay, while you guys are thinking about it, here's the QR again. I'll leave that up for a few seconds. And then the next slide is a whole bunch of other ways to communicate with me. I hope that if you've got questions and stuff, I'm going to stop sharing. And I would love for us to be able to have a good Q&A for the last few minutes. Because I know you guys are here because you want to be able to tell better stories. And I'd love to give you as much support as I can in doing that. So here are the other ways. If you want to screen grab this, these are the other ways you can find me. I'm in a lot of places. And I know that people are being choosier than they have been in the past about where they hang out on social media. So I try to give you as many options as possible to connect with me. That last link to bookshop.org, I am a big proponent of local independently owned bookstores. I do a writer's Ask Me Anything / office hours at McIntyre's Books in Farrington Village on the first Wednesday of every month. I am bullish on buying local books, but you can't always do that. And so my local bookseller friends tell me bookshop.org is okay with them. And so that's why that list is there. If you want to see what I've been reading in terms of climate communications, nature writing, that kind of stuff, you can find my information at that link and see my little collection of books. I'd love to hear from you guys. If you have questions that you don't feel comfortable asking in a group or something occurs to you afterwards, please reach out to me on any one of these channels. This is really something that's important to me beyond it being part of my work. I just feel like, we all need to be showing up with the things we can do right now. And this is something I can do. So I am happy to help you in any way I can. And I'm going to now try to stop sharing so I can see you guys again. Let's see. Stop sharing. There you are. Hi. Oh, good. I'm so glad to see that this is hugely helpful. Yes. The Helene, y'all, I use this thing so much in just trying to come up with how do I talk to people who aren't from here about Helene and all of the stuff they've been talking about, which is all, of course, resurfacing given the news, the decision the other week. about FEMA relief. What other questions, concerns, or heartburn do you have? How is this not going to work for you? Are there going to be, what's challenging to you or makes you feel a little like, "Ugh"? I see somebody typing. I'd also love to know how you might use this for yourself, or if you think there are other ways that you might use this, or people you might use it with. That would be terrific. Good. The formula is helpful. Obviously, it's designed to sort of create a case for something, but I use it to, write year-end reports for clients. I mean, it's a real workhorse, and I love it. How do you get, let's see, my recommendation for getting adults to do this activity. So I am an independent environmental educator and interpreter, nature interpreter. And so I often encounter people who didn't necessarily show up for an event about advocating for climate or telling a climate story. And one of the things that I try to do is just tell my own story about why I think this is important, and just invite people. That's why you remember at the end of mine, it was like, what are you seeing, or what are you doing? And I think that when you can start with modeling the behavior, um, and sometimes I'll do it much less formally than I did tonight. I mean, y'all, anytime we get a severe thunderstorm and a ton of rain, my front yard turns into a floodplain. Like it is crazy. Again, sorry, I should put the pictures in here, but and so I'll go around and just tell people like, y'all, that rain, let me tell you what happened in my yard, and how often it's happening. And so you can do it really informally, and sometimes that's easier, particularly if people are skeptical, um, or they're unsure or self-conscious about it. One of the things that we do need to be careful about as people who care about this and are probably doing a lot of actions is that we don't want people to feel bad that they aren't doing enough, or they aren't doing what we think they should do. And so often it's easier to get people to start talking by asking them what they're observing, because people pay attention to the weather. So I hope that's helpful. If there are some other strategies I can share with you, just email me with some more specific questions and I'll do that. But I find that it's easier to get started with people I know and people I don't know by just telling a story. And if you can peg it to a weather event or a headline, that's a really easy entree. How do you get people to be aware of climate change? Again, tell your story. That is super powerful because it's not an abstract headline. It's not something that is far off. It's my experience of something here in our community or my front yard. That really helps people because they may not connect those dots. That's why, to me, that data about the whiplash weather is so important, because that's what I'm seeing happening in my yard. And so now I can say like, hey, I'm seeing this thing, and I know it's related to climate change because the North Carolina Climate Data Center has been documenting it for the last 5 years. And I've been my data tracks with theirs. Then it's harder for people not to make that connection. So again, the more you can make the connection to science from your own experience, as opposed to laying science on people, that's going to give you a better chance at connecting with them and getting them to be aware of what the change is. So we've had wildfires in North Carolina recently. Fire is a topic that I'm really interested in, and getting people to understand how climate has created and changed the fire weather and what fire season looks like, and the wildland urban interface and all those kinds of things. That kind of stuff, people are interested in it, and that's one way that you can get them to see, like, oh, I don't remember wildfires happening so much in North Carolina. Well, let me explain why. Yes, John Muir Laws. Kathy, excellent point. Y'all, there are a ton of really, really good climate storytelling tools. And the more that you want to get into this, the more you can branch out beyond the position, rationale, proof strategy. There is a great program the National Park Service is doing, History of Hope. There's John Muir Laws, Project Drawdown has one. There are some really good ones. If you are interested in knowing more about some of the frameworks that are out there, follow up with me after the session and I can point you to all of those. I think they're great. And depending on my audience, I will use any of those. One of the things that we did in the Earth to Sky program was train in in the sort of the 4 or 5 major frameworks, so that we could find the right one for any group that we might be addressing. Yes, the I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of is one of my favorites, for all kinds of stuff. Also, just in nature journaling, right? That is a terrific framework, and it just helps so much. Do I have a good recommendation for citizen science climate stations? So, do you mean interpretation that you would have at those stations, or engaging people who visit those stations? Because I definitely have thoughts about it, but I want to give you the right answer, or the answer that's relevant to what you're looking for. Oh, equipment. So, that's a little farther afield. For me, I do participate in some community science projects, but it's mostly stuff like the COCO-RAS, the Community Rain, Hail, and Snow project. I do a lot of stuff with the National Phenology Network, their Nature's Notebook. I've just been doing my redbud trees out in the backyard. There are other people who are better about stuff like that. There's an educator named Chris Goforth, Goforth. Y'all may know her if you've done any programs over at Prairie Ridge. She really is one of the leading people in our state. I'm sure there are tons of good people with Wake County too. So Chris is a star. We all love Chris. But I think just on that, I'm not going to be your best person, but somebody like Chris sure would be. And Chris is on all the social channels and worth a follow. It's CHRIS, Goforth. Anything else I can help you guys with? Again, the strategy was created for younger kids. I've done a version of it, even lower grades that I can tell you about in a second, but it's great to work with your kids on, or with a group of kids. Littler kids than earlier grades or pre-K kids. I do one I call doodle label caption, and I get them to draw a picture of what's happening, and then label the things that they can. Sometimes we need to help them actually write those letters, and then write a sentence. Yes, visual thinking strategies, super good. That's one of the things that the doodle label caption is a really good thing for that. It gets you thinking it out. I just developed a packet for the Water Pen Pals program out of the Department of Environmental Quality. And it was super fun just to get folks to say, this is what's happening in this space. And it might be a picture or a drawing, or they might do the drawing. Yeah, great. What do you see that makes you say that? What more can we find? Exactly. So all of this, what we're finding with these climate story strategies, all of them, and with our own experience, is that we can bring people into these discussions in a variety of ways that don't start with climate change is real and the situation is getting dire. Excuse me. So we have all kinds of techniques to bring people in. The most powerful one to get things started is us showing up as ourselves with our reasons, again, so that we are kind of being ambassadors for the scientific community, but also just for our communities. We are trusted people within our communities and can really reach out to folks and say, this is what's happening. Like, I can talk to anybody in my neighborhood and they know what happens in my front yard. I often get spectators. It gave me an opportunity not just to say like, yeah, this is pretty crazy, but let's talk about why this is happening. So don't forget your own ability as a climate storyteller, and that almost anything you're noticing, back to the point on some of these other strategies, if you're noticing it, that's a point of entry for you to talk to people about it. Any other questions, observations, topics you want to talk about that I'll try to answer? Okay, Katrina, I guess I'll turn it back over to you for final thoughts and wrapping us up.
Oh, sorry, I said great, but I was still muted. Great. Well, thank you again, everyone, for coming today and for attending this lecture. Thank you for your great observations and questions. If you do have any more, like Margot said, please feel free to email her. You can also reply to the email that sent you this link, and I will make sure to pass that information on to her. Thank you, Margot, for presenting and for showing us that really great framework. For those of you who are seeking environmental education credit, you are going to receive a follow-up email later in the week with the form. Margot has also offered to share her presentation, so I will email that at the same time, as well as this template too, in case you are not able to access it very well through the chat. I know stuff like that can happen. I'll also make this recording available on our environmental lecture series YouTube playlist. I try to send it all out at once, so sometimes there is a delay in getting that video posted. So if you don't get the EE form by the end of the week, it's probably because the YouTube video has not yet been posted. We hope to see everyone again during our next lecture, which I will pull up what that is. That's going to be Devin Rayburn from North Carolina, from NC State's Applied Ecology Department. And they are going to be talking about high-resolution stream networks revealing habitats for petitioned burrowing crayfishes. So if you want to learn a little more about burrowing crayfishes, or crawdads, as they call them where I'm from, definitely tune in for that. I think there are still some spots available on RecLink. So I think that's everything. Let me double check my little list of talking points. Yep, that's it. All right, guys. So again, thanks again for coming, and y'all have a great rest of your night.
Thanks, you guys. Take care.